I was still staring at the half-full glass in front of me when my daughter walked out of the restaurant like nothing had happened. No hug, no goodbye. Just a quick glance at her phone, and she was gone. I remember thinking it felt rehearsed. Then a man in a security uniform stepped closer, his voice low, careful. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to say this, but I saw her put something in your drink while you were away from the table." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table as I looked down at the glass again. My own daughter. And suddenly nothing in my life felt safe anymore. If this moment already has your heart racing, I'd really like to know what you're thinking. Have you ever felt something was wrong before you had proof? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories like this speak to you, you're always welcome to stay with me by subscribing. My name is Beverly Simmons. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I understood what it meant to love someone unconditionally. Now I'm not so sure. I live in a quiet town just outside Columbus, Ohio, a place where people still wave when they pass each other on the street, where neighbors remember your birthday, and where a family business can still mean something. My husband Walter and I built our restaurant here from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make us rich. But it fed people, it employed good souls, and it carried our name with pride. For 32 years, that restaurant was our life. And then one winter morning, Walter didn't wake up. There are moments in life when everything fractures so suddenly that your mind refuses to catch up. That morning was one of them. I remember the sunlight coming through the curtains hitting his side of the bed and thinking how peaceful he looked. I remember calling his name once, twice, and then realizing something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. Grief doesn't come like a storm. It seeps in like cold air through cracks you didn't know existed. And when you're not looking, it fills every room. But I didn't have the luxury to fall apart not completely. There were bills to pay, employees who depended on me, and a business that could easily collapse without steady hands guiding it. So I did what I had always done. I kept going. I learned things Walter used to handle: inventory, vendor negotiations, late-night bookkeeping. I worked longer hours than I ever had before. I smiled at customers even when I felt like I was breaking inside. And slowly, painfully, I kept the restaurant alive. I thought that would make my daughter proud. Nicole Simmons is my only child. She's 35 now, but when I think of her, I still see the little girl who used to run between the tables at the restaurant carrying napkins too big for her hands, insisting she was helping Mommy and Daddy. She used to laugh easily back then. She had this bright, ringing laugh that made other people smile without even knowing why. After Walter died, that laugh disappeared. At first, I told myself it was grief. Of course it was grief. She had lost her father, her hero. They had a bond I could never fully understand. He was the one who made everything feel safe for her. But grief doesn't always soften people. Sometimes it sharpens them in ways that cut deep. Nicole became distant. Not overnight, but gradually, like a door closing inch by inch until you suddenly realize it's shut completely. She stopped coming by the restaurant. She answered my calls less and less. When we did speak, it often turned into arguments that left both of us exhausted and wounded. She said I had changed, that I cared more about the restaurant than I did about her. At first, I tried to explain. I told her I was keeping the business alive because it was what her father would have wanted, because it was how I kept him close, because it was the only way I knew how to survive the emptiness he left behind. But explanations don't always reach someone who has already decided how they feel. Over time, the arguments shifted. They became about money. Nicole had never been irresponsible as a teenager, but adulthood seemed to hit her differently. She struggled to hold on to jobs. She jumped from one idea to another, starting a small online boutique, then trying to open a fitness studio, then investing in something she barely understood. Each time she believed it would be the thing that changed everything. Each time it fell apart. And each time she came back to me. Mom, I just need a little help to get back on my feet. The first time I didn't hesitate. The second time I reassured myself it was temporary. By the third and fourth times, something inside me started to shift, but I still said yes. Because she was my daughter. Because saying no felt like failing her. But there comes a point when helping someone doesn't lift them, it anchors them deeper into the very patterns that are hurting them. I didn't understand that right away. It took years. And by the time I did, the damage between us had already begun. The first time I said no, Nicole didn't speak to me for 3 months. When she finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to accuse. You've changed. She told me over the phone, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite name back then. You care more about that restaurant than you do about me. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was true, but because part of me feared that maybe somehow I had made it feel true to her. From that point on, every conversation felt like walking across fragile glass. If I helped her, I was enabling her. If I didn't, I was abandoning her. There was no right answer, only consequences. Eventually, the distance between us became something we both learned to live with. Birthdays were quieter. Holidays became shorter. Phone calls turned into brief check-ins instead of real conversations. I told myself it was just a phase. That one day she would come back to me not for money, not out of need, but because she wanted to. And then, a few months ago, she did. It started with a text. Hey Mom, I've been thinking about you. Simple. Gentle. Familiar. I stared at that message longer than I should have. My heart did something I hadn't felt in a long time. It softened. I replied carefully at first, not wanting to scare the moment away. But Nicole kept the conversation going. She asked how I was doing. She asked about the restaurant. She even asked about things she used to ignore, like my health, my routine, my day-to-day life. Then she called, hearing her voice again. Really hearing it without tension or distance felt like something inside me unlocking. I miss you, she said. And just like that, every wall I had built over the years began to crumble. She started visiting again, not often at first, but enough to feel real. When she came by, she would sit with me in the kitchen, drink coffee, ask questions. She laughed again softly, not like before, but it was there. That laugh. I didn't question it. I didn't analyze it. I didn't want to. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my daughter back. And maybe that was my first mistake. Looking back now, I can see the moments I chose not to look too closely, the questions she asked about my finances, the way she would casually bring up retirement like she was planting an idea, the gentle suggestions that I had done enough and deserved to rest. At the time, it felt like care, like concern, like love finally returning after years of distance. But sitting here now, remembering that glass in front of me, remembering what that security guard said, I can't help but wonder if all of it was something else entirely, something planned, something careful, something I didn't want to see until it was already too late. If you had asked me a week before that dinner whether I trusted my daughter, I would have said yes without hesitation. Not because everything between us was perfect, but because I wanted it to be. That's the dangerous thing about hope. It doesn't just open your heart, it softens your judgment. In the days leading up to that night, Nicole became more present in my life than she had been in years. She called me almost every evening, sometimes just to ask how my day went, sometimes to tell me about something small, something ordinary that made it feel like we were slipping back into the rhythm we used to have. "Did you eat, Mom?" she asked one night. I laughed softly. "I own a restaurant, honey. I think I can manage that." I know she said her tone light, but layered with something deeper. "I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." That sentence stayed with me. No one had said that to me in a long time. At first I found it comforting. Then slowly, I began to notice how often the conversation turned practical. "How's business been lately? Are you still handling all the finances yourself? Have you ever thought about bringing someone in to help manage things?" They weren't unreasonable questions. In fact, if a friend had asked me those same things, I might not have thought twice. But coming from Nicole, who had never shown much interest in the restaurant beyond what it could provide financially, it felt different. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. One afternoon, she stopped by the house unexpectedly. I was in the middle of sorting through some old paperwork Walter had left behind, receipts, invoices, notes, scribbled in his handwriting that I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. Nicole stood in the doorway for a moment watching me. "You still keep all of that?" she asked. I glanced up, offering a small smile. "Some of it. It's hard to let go." She stepped closer, picking up one of the folders and flipping through it. "You know," she said casually, "you don't have to carry all of this by yourself anymore." I felt a flicker of something, gratitude maybe, or maybe relief. "I've been doing it for a long time," I replied. "It's just what I know. But should you have to," she pressed gently. "You've worked your whole life, Mom. You deserve to rest." There it was again. That word, rest. It sounded so kind on the surface, so thoughtful. But something about the way she said it made it feel heavier than it should have been. "I'm not ready for that," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Nicole nodded quickly as if she hadn't meant to push. "Of course. I didn't mean right now. I just mean eventually. Eventually." She said it like it was something already decided. We moved on from the conversation after that, but it lingered in the back of my mind longer than I wanted to admit. A couple of days later, she brought it up again, this time in a different way. "What would happen if you got sick?" she asked over coffee, stirring her cup slowly without looking at me. "Like, really sick." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'd manage. I always have, but who would make decisions for you?" she continued. "Who would handle the restaurant? Your accounts? The house?" I let out a soft sigh. "Nicole, I'm not planning on getting sick anytime soon." "I know," she said quickly. "I'm just saying it's smart to be prepared." Prepared. Another word that felt reasonable. Another word that left a quiet weight behind it. I studied her for a moment. Her expression was calm, composed. But there was a focus in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not the scattered uncertainty she used to carry, but something more deliberate. "I have a lawyer," I said finally. "Everything's in order." Her gaze flickered for just a second before she smiled again. "That's good. I just worry about you." And just like that, the moment passed. Or at least, I let it pass. Because it was easier to believe she was concerned than to question why she was asking. That's what I keep coming back to now. Not the questions themselves, but my willingness to ignore what they might have meant. The night of the dinner, she called me in the late afternoon. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice warm, almost excited. "Are you still free tonight?" "Of course," I replied. "You said you wanted to go out." "I do," she said quickly. "I found a place I think you'll like." That caught my attention. Nicole had never been the one to choose restaurants for us. Usually we went somewhere familiar, somewhere safe, but this time she had already picked it out. "What kind of place?" I asked. "It's nice," she said. "A little more upscale than what we usually do. I just..." I want tonight to feel special. Special. There was that word again, carefully placed like everything else she'd been saying. I hesitated for a moment, not long enough to call it doubt. Just long enough to notice something shift inside me. But then I pushed it aside. All right, I said. Send me the address. When I arrived, the restaurant was exactly as she had described. Soft lighting, quiet music. Tables spaced just far enough apart to feel private. It wasn't the kind of place we had ever gone to before, but it wasn't so far out of reach that it felt strange. Nicole was already there when I walked in. She stood up as soon as she saw me, her face lighting up in a way that made my chest tighten. "Mom," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. For a moment, I let myself sink into it. This is what I've been waiting for, I thought. We sat down, and for the first few minutes, everything felt easy. She asked about the restaurant. I told her about a new dish Denise had been experimenting with. She laughed at a story about a regular customer who refused to sit anywhere but the same booth he'd claimed for years. It felt normal, comfortable, almost like we hadn't spent years drifting apart. Then the waiter came and Nicole took the lead. "We'll have a bottle of the house red," she said smoothly, barely glancing at me. "And she'll have the grilled salmon." I raised an eyebrow. "You ordering for me now?" She smiled. "I remember what you like." There was something about that answer that should have made me pause. Instead, it made me feel seen. The wine arrived first. The waiter poured a glass for each of us, and Nicole lifted hers slightly. "To fresh starts," she said. I hesitated just a fraction of a second before lifting my own glass. "To fresh starts," I echoed. We clinked glasses. I took a sip. At the time, it tasted like nothing more than wine. But looking back now, I can't help but wonder if that was the moment everything had already begun. Because not long after that, Nicole's phone buzzed. She glanced down at it, her expression shifting just slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, already reaching for her purse. "I need to take this. It's important." "Now?" I asked, surprised. "It'll just be a minute," she replied quickly, standing up. "Don't go anywhere." I watched her walk toward the exit, her steps quick, purposeful. She didn't look back. And for reasons I couldn't explain at the time, a cold feeling settled in my chest as I sat there alone. Because suddenly, the evening didn't feel natural anymore. It felt timed, set. Like I had just stepped into something that had been carefully arranged long before I arrived. And I was the only one at the table who didn't know the script. I sat there for a few seconds after Nicole disappeared through the front doors, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. People step outside to take calls all the time, I told myself. It's nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. It settled deeper, colder. I glanced at the glass in front of me, the same one I had lifted just moments earlier. The wine caught the soft light of the restaurant, its surface still undisturbed. There was nothing unusual about it. Nothing that would have made anyone stop and question it. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to take another sip. I don't know if it was instinct or fear. Maybe it was both. I folded my hands in my lap, trying to steady them. My heartbeat felt louder than the music playing overhead. Every sound around me, cutlery, quiet conversations, footsteps seemed distant, like I was listening from underwater. That's when I noticed him. He had been standing near the entrance earlier, I remembered now. A tall man in a dark uniform watching the room the way security staff often do, alert but unobtrusive. He approached slowly, not wanting to draw attention. "Ma'am," he said softly. I looked up, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Yes." He hesitated, glancing briefly around us before leaning slightly closer. "I don't want to alarm you," he said, his voice careful, measured. "But I need to tell you something important." My chest tightened. "What is it? What is it?" His gaze flickered toward the table, toward my glass, then back to me. "I saw the woman you were with," he said quietly. "Your daughter, I assume." I swallowed. "Yes." "There was a moment earlier," he continued, "when you stepped away from the table. I was stationed near the hallway. I saw her take something out of her purse, a small packet. My fingers gripped the edge of the table before I even realized I was doing it, and I whispered, 'She poured it into your drink.' The world didn't spin. It didn't shatter. It just stopped. For a long second, I couldn't hear anything. Not the music, not the conversations around us, not even my own breathing. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something else. Something that would undo what I had just heard. But he didn't. "I'm sorry," he added quietly. "I thought you should know." My eyes dropped slowly to the glass in front of me, that same glass I had already taken a sip from. A faint tremor ran through my hands. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely more than air. "I'm certain," he said. "I've worked security for years. I pay attention to details. It didn't look like anything normal." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he must have been mistaken, that he had seen something else misunderstood, something simple. But deep down, something inside me had already accepted it. Because suddenly everything from the past few days started to rearrange itself in my mind. The questions, the concern, the way Nicole had insisted on choosing the place, the way she had ordered for me, the way she had left. It all fit together in a way I didn't want to see. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice shaking now despite my efforts to stay composed. The man straightened slightly, as if relieved that I was taking it seriously. "Don't drink anything else," he said immediately. "And don't touch the glass if you can help it. I'm going to notify the manager. We'll handle this quietly." Quietly. The word echoed in my head, as if something this devastating could be handled quietly. I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. He stepped away, moving toward the back of the restaurant with controlled urgency, and I was left alone with the glass, alone with the realization that my daughter, my own daughter, might have just done something I couldn't even begin to understand. I stared at the wine, searching for something, anything that would make it make sense. A color change, a scent, a sign. There was nothing. Just a perfectly ordinary drink. Just like the evening had seemed at first. A few minutes later, a woman approached my table. She introduced herself as Cynthia Moore, the manager. Her tone was calm, professional, but there was a seriousness behind her eyes that told me she already knew. "Mrs. Simmons," she said gently. "I understand there may be a concern about your beverage." I nodded slowly. "Yes. First, I want you to know we're taking this very seriously," she continued. "We're going to secure the glass and have it tested. In the meantime, I'd like to move you to a private area where we can make sure you're comfortable and safe." Safe. The word hit harder than it should have. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe from my own family. "I'm okay here," I said quietly. I need a moment." She studied me for a second, then nodded. "Of course. We'll be right nearby. Please don't drink anything else." 2 members of the staff came discreetly and replaced the glass with an empty one, carefully removing the original without drawing attention from other diners. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. Plates were still being served. People were still laughing. Life was still moving. And yet mine had just cracked open. I reached for my phone with unsteady fingers and dialed Nicole's number. It rang. and rang. No answer. I tried again. This time it went straight to voicemail. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I opened our message thread and typed, "Where are you?" The message showed as delivered. No response. I stared at the screen, willing it to light up. It didn't. Minutes passed. Then more. Still nothing. I called again. Voicemail. It wasn't just that she had left. It was how she had left. Quick, clean, final, as if she had known exactly when to go. As if her part of the evening had already been completed. My hand lowered slowly, the phone slipping back onto the table. And that's when another thought hit me. Sharp. Terrifying. I had taken a sip. Just one, but enough. A wave of panic rose in my chest. What if I began, but the words wouldn't come out? What if it had already started working? What if whatever she had put in that glass was already in my system? I pressed my palm flat against the table, trying to ground myself. Breathe, Beverly. Think. I didn't feel dizzy, not yet. I didn't feel weak, not yet. But what if it was slow? What if it was meant to take time? The possibilities spiraled faster than I could control them. I looked up as Cynthia returned, her expression slightly more urgent now. "Mrs. Simmons, she said we've contacted the appropriate authorities to ensure everything is handled properly. In the meantime, I'd like to ask, are you feeling any different? Lightheaded, unwell in any way?" I shook my head, though my voice wavered when I spoke. "No, I don't think so. If anything changes, you need to tell us immediately," she said. "We can arrange medical assistance right away." Medical assistance. The words made everything feel even more real. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was something serious. Something dangerous. I nodded again, barely aware of the movement. "Thank you," I managed. She gave me a reassuring look before stepping back. And once again, I was alone. Alone with the silence, alone with the questions, alone with the image of my daughter smiling, gentle, concerned, just hours earlier. How do you reconcile those two versions of the same person? How do you understand the moment when someone you love becomes someone you don't recognize? I sat there for what felt like an eternity, replaying every second of the evening in my mind. Every word, every look, every pause, and slowly, painfully, a single truth began to settle over me. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. Whatever Nicole had done, she had meant to do it. And for the first time in my life, I realized something that terrified me more than anything else. I didn't know my daughter anymore. I don't remember leaving the restaurant. Not clearly. I remember fragments, the quiet murmur of voices around me, the steady reassurance in Cynthia's tone, the distant sound of sirens somewhere outside. But everything felt muffled, like my mind was trying to protect me from absorbing too much all at once. What I do remember is this: I didn't drink another drop. And I stayed awake long enough to understand that something had changed in my life in a way that could never be undone. A paramedic checked my vitals before I left. Blood pressure, pulse, pupils, all normal, they said. No immediate signs of distress. But they recommended I go home, stay alert, and call for help if anything felt off. Sometimes these substances take time, one of them explained gently. That sentence stayed with me the entire drive home. Sometimes they take time. I drove slowly, both hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. Every passing streetlight felt sharper, brighter, as if my senses were trying to compensate for the fear building inside me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it always had. Still, quiet, safe. Or at least it used to feel that way. I sat in the car for a full minute before turning off the engine, staring at the front door like it belonged to someone else. Because suddenly, nothing in my life felt familiar anymore, not even the place I had lived in for decades. When I finally stepped inside, the silence wrapped around me. No television, no music, no voice calling out from another room. Just the soft echo of my own footsteps. I locked the door behind me. Then I checked it again, and then again. It wasn't just fear of what had already happened. It was fear of what might happen next. I set my purse down on the kitchen counter and leaned against it, pressing my hands flat against the cool surface. My breathing was steady, but my thoughts were anything but. Nicole. My daughter. The word felt foreign now. I pulled out my phone again and opened our messages. Still nothing from her. No explanation. No apology. Not even a simple, "I'm okay." Just silence, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. I typed another message before I could stop myself. Nicole, I need you to tell me what happened tonight. I stared at the screen after sending it, my heart pounding in a way that felt louder than the quiet house around me. A few seconds passed, then a minute, then 5. Still nothing. I set the phone down and walked slowly into the living room, lowering myself onto the couch, as if my body suddenly weighed more than it should. My eyes drifted to the framed photo on the shelf across from me. Walter and Nicole. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old in that picture. She was sitting on his shoulders, her hands gripping his head as she laughed, her face bright with joy. Walter looked just as happy. That was the version of her I kept holding on to. That was the version I wanted to believe still existed. But tonight had shattered something I didn't know how to piece back together. I leaned forward, pressing my fingers to my temples. Think. Go back. There had been signs. I knew there had, and now one by one they started to come back to me. Small moments I had brushed aside. Tiny details I had chosen not to question. Like the afternoon she had come over and insisted on making me tea. Sit down, Mom, she had said, gently guiding me to the table. You do too much. Let me take care of you for once. At the time I had smiled. It felt like a role reversal. A daughter stepping into a space she had avoided for years. But now thinking about it, I remembered something else. I had felt unusually tired that evening, not exhausted, just heavy. I had gone to bed earlier than usual, slept deeper than I had in months. I had told myself it was because I needed the rest. Now I wasn't so sure. Then there was the paperwork. A few weeks ago, Nicole had shown up with a folder. Nothing serious, she had said quickly when I asked about it. Just some things I think we should have in place. You know, just in case. Just in case. She had used that phrase more than once. I remembered flipping through the page's legal language official formatting. Something about medical decisions, financial authorization, words like temporary and support. I hadn't signed anything. Not because I suspected anything at the time, but because something in my gut had told me to wait. I'll have Martin look at it first, I had said. Nicole's reaction had been subtle, but now I saw it clearly. The way her smile had tightened. The way she had quickly gathered the papers back into the folder. Of course, she had said, her tone still light. I just thought it would be easier. Easier. That word again. Everything about the past few weeks suddenly felt orchestrated, planned, like pieces being moved into place while I stood in the center, unaware I was part of the board. A sharp sound broke through my thoughts. My phone. I grabbed it quickly, my heart jumping at the sudden noise. Nicole's name lit up the screen. My fingers trembled as I opened the message. "Sorry, my phone died. I had to run out earlier." "Everything okay?" I stared at the words, reading them twice. Then a third time. "Everything okay?" The normalcy of the message made my stomach turn. She wasn't asking what happened. She wasn't explaining anything. She was pretending that nothing had happened, that the night had ended the way any ordinary dinner would. My hands curled slightly around the phone. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Did she think I didn't know? Or did she think I wouldn't question it? Or worse, did she believe she had already done enough that it didn't matter anymore? A chill ran down my spine. Because that possibility, the idea that she had expected something to happen after she left, felt far more dangerous than anything else. I typed slowly, choosing each word with care. "A security guard said he saw you put something in my drink. I didn't add anything else. No accusation, no emotion, just the truth." The message sent. And once again I waited. This time the silence felt different, heavier, longer. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. No reply. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, until the reflection of my own face stared back at me, older, more tired, more uncertain than I had ever seen it. That was when the fear shifted. Up until that point, I had been afraid of what she might have done. Now, I was afraid of what she was capable of doing next. Because silence in that moment wasn't confusion. It wasn't shock. It was calculation. I stood slowly, my body moving on instinct more than thought, and walked toward the hallway. For the first time since Walter died, I didn't feel like I was grieving alone in that house. I felt like I was being watched. Not physically, but through something far more unsettling, through knowledge, through planning, through someone who knew my routines, my habits, my weaknesses because she had grown up inside them. I reached my bedroom and paused at the door, then without fully understanding why I turned the lock. A simple motion, a small action, but it felt like crossing a line I never thought I would reach, locking myself away from my own daughter. And as I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the phone in my hand, waiting for a response that didn't come, one thought kept repeating in my mind. This wasn't just one night. This wasn't just one mistake. Whatever Nicole had started, it had begun long before that dinner, and I had been standing in the middle of it the entire time without ever realizing I was in danger. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off and my eyes open, listening to every small sound the house made, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old wood, the faint whisper of wind brushing against the windows. Sounds that had always been ordinary suddenly felt amplified, like warnings I couldn't quite interpret. But the noise outside wasn't what kept me awake. It was the noise inside my own mind. Memories don't ask for permission when they return. They come when they want, bringing with them pieces of truth you weren't ready to face before. And that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the years after Walter died. Grief is complicated when you're a mother. You don't get to fall apart the way you might want to because someone else is watching you. Someone younger. Someone hurting just as much, someone who needs you to stay standing even when you can barely hold yourself together. I thought I had done that. I thought I had been strong for both of us. But now, lying there in the quiet darkness, I started to question everything. After Walter passed, the world didn't pause for us. Bills kept coming. The restaurant still needed to open every morning. Employees still needed direction. Customers still expected consistency. Life demanded that I move forward whether I was ready or not. So I did. I threw myself into the restaurant in a way that was almost desperate. Not because I loved the work more than my family, but because it was the only place where things still made sense. There were tasks to complete, problems to solve, a rhythm I could follow. Grief had no structure. The restaurant did, but Nicole didn't see it that way. To her, every extra hour I spent there was proof that I was choosing something else over her. I remember one night not long after the funeral. She had come home late, her face flushed with anger, her eyes sharp in a way that made me uneasy. "You're still working?" she asked, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while I balanced receipts and invoices. "I need to," I replied gently. "We're behind on." "You always need to," she cut in. "That's the problem." I looked up at her, then really looked and saw something I hadn't expected. Not just sadness, not just grief, resentment. "You think this is easy for me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "I think you're hiding," she snapped. "You're hiding in that restaurant so you don't have to deal with what actually happened." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. "I am dealing with it," I said, though even as I spoke, I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You're replacing him with it." That was the first time she said something that made me feel like I had lost her, even though she was standing right in front of me. After that, the arguments came more often. At first, they were about time. Then they became about attention. And eventually, they became about money. The first time Nicole asked for financial help, it felt reasonable. "I just need a little to get started," she told me, sitting across from me at the same kitchen table. "I have a plan this time. It's different." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I gave her what she asked for. And when that plan didn't work out, I told myself it was just bad luck. The second time I hesitated, but I still said yes. The third time something inside me tightened. By the fourth, I knew I was no longer helping her move forward. I was helping her avoid consequences. But saying no to your own child, it doesn't feel like setting a boundary. It feels like betrayal. I remember the first time I refused. She had come to me again asking for money to cover a loss she hadn't fully explained. Her voice was softer than usual, almost pleading. "I just need this one more time," she said. "I promise I'll pay you back." I sat there for a long moment, my hands folded in front of me, my heart pulling me in two different directions. "I can't, Nicole," I said finally. The silence that followed was immediate, heavy, unforgiving. "What do you mean you can't?" she asked, her voice losing its softness. "I mean, I shouldn't," I corrected gently. "This isn't helping you anymore." Her eyes hardened. "So that's it," she said. "You just stop being my mother when it's inconvenient." "That's not what I'm doing," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm trying to help you in a different way. By letting me fail," she shot back. "By letting you learn," I replied. She laughed, then a short, bitter sound that didn't belong to the daughter I remembered. "Unbelievable," she said, standing up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "You've changed." The words felt familiar. Too familiar. "I haven't changed," I said softly. "I'm just trying to do what's right." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You've just decided I'm not worth the effort anymore." That was the moment something shifted between us in a way I didn't fully understand at the time. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just disappointment. It was something deeper, something that stayed. After that, every interaction carried a different weight. Every request felt like a test. Every refusal felt like confirmation of something she already believed. And slowly, without either of us saying it out loud, our relationship became transactional. She came to me when she needed something. I braced myself for what it would cost emotionally, financially, mentally, and when I started saying no more often, she started coming around less. Calls became shorter, visits became rare, conversations became surface level. Until eventually, they nearly disappeared altogether. I told myself she needed space, that she would come back when she was ready, that this was just part of growing up, part of finding her own way. But now, lying there in the dark, replaying everything, I saw it differently. What I thought was distance may have been something else entirely. Something building, something hardening. All those years of perceived rejection, of boundaries she didn't agree with, of expectations that didn't match reality, they didn't just fade away. They settled. They layered. They shaped the way she saw me. Not as a mother trying her best, but as someone who had withheld, someone who had chosen something else over her. And if you believe that long enough, if you tell yourself that story over and over again, eventually it stops being a feeling. It becomes a justification, a reason, an excuse. I turned onto my side, staring at the faint outline of the door in the darkness, because now for the first time I had to ask myself something I had avoided for years. Not just what Nicole had done, but why she believed she had the right to do it. And that question was far more frightening than anything else, because it meant the danger didn't start at that restaurant. It started long before that. And I had been part of the story that led us here, even if I never meant for it to end this way. By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but sleep had never come. I lay there until the first light pushed through the curtains, turning the darkness into something softer, but no less heavy. The house felt different in daylight. Less threatening, maybe, but not safer. Nothing felt safe anymore. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my mind already racing ahead of me. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. Still no response from Nicole. Not after my last message. Not after I told her what the security guard had seen. That silence said more than anything she could have written. I pressed my lips together, forcing myself to stay calm. Emotion wasn't going to help me now. Not fear, not anger, not even grief. What I needed was clarity and answers. By mid-morning, I found myself sitting in Martin Hale's office. Martin had been our family attorney for years, long before Walter passed. He was one of those men who didn't speak more than necessary, but when he did, you listened. Steady, careful. The kind of person you trusted not because he told you to, but because he gave you no reason not to. He didn't ask me to explain everything right away. He simply waited. So I told him everything. The dinner, the guard, the glass, Nicole leaving, the message, the silence. I watched his expression closely as I spoke, looking for any sign that he thought I might be mistaken, that there was some other explanation I hadn't considered. There wasn't. When I finished, he leaned back slightly in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "And the drink is being tested?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "The restaurant manager made sure of it." He nodded once. "Good." That was all he said at first. No immediate reaction. No assumptions. Just quiet acknowledgement. But I could see it in his eyes. He understood the gravity of what I was telling him. "What do you think this means?" I asked finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Martin didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, walked over to a cabinet, and pulled out a folder. He brought it back to the desk, set it down carefully, but didn't open it yet. "Before I answer that," he said, "I need to ask you something, Beverly." I nodded. In the past few months, has Nicole asked you about any legal matters? He continued. Your estate? Your accounts? Anything related to decision-making authority? I hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. She has. How frequently more than before, I admitted. At first I thought it was just concern, but it kept coming up. Different ways, different angles. Martin's expression tightened just slightly, but enough for me to notice. And did she ever present you with documents to sign? My stomach dropped. Yes. What kind? I didn't go through them fully, I said. Something about medical decisions. Financial access. I told her I wanted you to look at them first. Martin exhaled quietly, then finally opened the folder in front of him. Inside were several documents, some familiar, others not. These are standard forms related to power of attorney, he said, sliding one toward me. They allow someone to make legal and financial decisions on your behalf under certain conditions. I stared at the page, the words swimming slightly in front of my eyes. She wanted me to sign something like this, I whispered. And you didn't, he confirmed. No. Good. The way he said it made my chest tighten, why I asked. He met my gaze directly. Because in the wrong hands, he said carefully, these documents can be used to take control of nearly every aspect of your life. The air in the room shifted. What do you mean? I asked, even though part of me already understood. I mean, he continued, his voice calm but firm, if someone had both legal authority and evidence, or even the appearance that you were not fully capable of managing your affairs, they could step in and make decisions for you. About your finances, your property, your business. My throat went dry. You're saying, I began, but the words caught. I'm saying, Martin interrupted gently, that if what you've told me is accurate, and if that drink contained something designed to impair you, then this may not have been about harming you physically. He paused. It may have been about control. The word landed harder than anything else he had said. Control. Not a moment of anger. Not a mistake. A plan. My hands tightened in my lap. No, I whispered. No, that doesn't make sense. She wouldn't. Beverly, Martin said softly, cutting through my denial without raising his voice. I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but I am saying that the pieces you've described, they align with something very specific. I shook my head, my heart pounding again. She's my daughter. I know he said. She wouldn't try to take over my life. He didn't respond immediately, and that silence said everything, because Martin wasn't the kind of man who spoke carelessly. If he was suggesting this even cautiously, it meant the possibility was real. I need proof, I said finally, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. I need to know exactly what was in that glass. You will, he assured me. And when you do, we'll decide the next step. I nodded, though the reassurance didn't settle anything inside me, because something else had already begun to form in my mind. A pattern. A connection. Martin, I said slowly. What if this isn't the first time? His eyes sharpened slightly. What do you mean? I took a breath, forcing myself to say it out loud. There were moments, I said. Times I felt off. Tired. Slower than usual. I thought it was stress, or age, or just everything catching up with me. I swallowed hard. But what if it wasn't? The room felt colder. Martin didn't dismiss the idea. He didn't reassure me that I was imagining things. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice more focused now. Do you remember when those moments started? I thought back, replaying the past few months in my mind. They became more noticeable. Around the time Nicole started visiting again, I said. Martin nodded once. That's important. A chill ran through me, because suddenly the timeline felt too precise, too aligned, as if everything had been building towards something deliberate. Is there anyone else involved? Martin asked. I hesitated. Then another name surfaced. Brandon. Nicole had mentioned him a few times over the past months. Her boyfriend? New but already deeply woven into her life. I didn't know much about him, but I remembered one conversation. A passing comment. He understands how things work, Nicole had said once. He knows how to handle complicated situations. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now, I felt a knot form in my stomach. There's someone else, I said quietly. Her boyfriend, Brandon Cole. Martin's expression shifted, subtle but alert. What do you know about him? He asked. Not enough, I admitted. Then that's where we start, he said. He reached for his phone. I'm going to bring someone in, he continued. A colleague I trust. She specializes in situations where things aren't always what they appear to be. An investigator, I asked. He nodded. Detective Sharon Briggs. The name meant nothing to me, but the weight behind it did, because this was no longer just a family issue. This was something else, something structured, something dangerous. And as I sat there in that quiet office with the truth beginning to take shape around me, one realization settled in cold and undeniable. Whatever Nicole had done, it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was intentional. And I was only just beginning to see how far it might go. By the time I left Martin's office, something inside me had shifted. Not completely. Not enough to erase the ache in my chest every time I thought of Nicole, but enough to understand one thing clearly. If I wanted the truth, I couldn't afford to act like a mother anymore. I had to start thinking like someone who might be in danger. That realization didn't come easily. It sat heavy in my stomach as I drove home, the late morning sunlight too bright against my eyes, the world outside moving as if nothing had changed. People walked along sidewalks, cars passed by. Life continued, and yet inside my own life, everything had tilted. I didn't go straight inside when I pulled into my driveway. Instead, I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the front door. I thought about all the years that door had opened for Nicole, every time she came home, every time she needed comfort, every time she needed help. And now, I had to question what it meant if she walked through it again. When I finally stepped inside, I locked the door behind me out of habit, but this time the click felt louder. Final. I set my purse down and immediately checked my phone. Still nothing. No reply to my message. No explanation. No denial. Just silence. And for the first time, I didn't reach out again. Instead, I waited, because Martin had been clear. If Nicole believed I didn't know everything, she might reveal more on her own. And that was exactly what I needed. The truth, not the version she chose to tell me, but the one she couldn't control. Around early afternoon, my phone rang. My heart jumped instinctively when I saw her name. Nicole. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, Mom. She said, her voice soft, almost careful. I've been trying to reach you. That alone made something inside me tighten. Trying. You texted, I replied evenly. I responded. A brief pause. Then, yeah. I saw that. Her tone had changed just slightly, measured, controlled. I didn't know what you were talking about, she added quickly, putting something in your drink that doesn't even make sense. There it was. Denial. Not confusion. Not concern. Denial. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. A part of me wanted to confront her right then, to push, to demand answers, to force the truth out into the open. But another part, stronger now, sharper, held me back. Not yet. I'm just telling you what I was told, I said calmly. A security guard saw you. Another pause. Longer this time. That's ridiculous, she said, a hint of defensiveness slipping through. Why would I do that? The question hung between us. Why would I do that? I almost answered it. Almost said the words that had been forming in my mind since the night before. But I didn't. Instead, I shifted. You left pretty quickly, I said. I told you I had a call, she replied, and then your phone died. Yes. Convenient. Everything about her answers felt rehearsed. Not spontaneous, not emotional, just structured enough to hold together under light pressure. I didn't hear from you for hours, I added. I went straight home, she said. I was tired. Another lie. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. Because if she had truly gone home, if nothing had happened, if everything was normal, she would have called. She would have checked on me. She would have asked if I was okay, but she hadn't. And that silence told me more than anything she was saying now. Well, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm fine. Good, she replied quickly, too quickly. That's all that matters. No, it wasn't. But I let her believe that I believed it was. I was thinking she continued, her tone shifting again, softer, almost concerned. You seemed a little off last night. Maybe just tired, but I don't know. It worried me. There it was, the pivot, subtle, carefully placed. You seemed off. I felt something cold settle into place inside me. What do you mean? I asked. Just a little distracted, she said. You didn't seem like yourself. I think I was surprised you left so suddenly, I replied. Yeah, she said quickly. I felt bad about that. I just had something I needed to handle. Silence stretched between us for a moment. Then she spoke again. Have you been feeling okay lately? Like physically? There it was again. The same question she had asked before. Framed differently, but with the same intention underneath. I leaned back slightly, my fingers tightening around the phone. I'm fine, Nicole. Are you sure? She pressed gently. You've been working a lot. Maybe it's catching up with you. I've been doing this for years, I said. I know, she replied. But things change. People slow down. It's normal. Normal. The word echoed in my mind. Normal to feel weaker. Normal to feel confused. Normal to need help. You don't have to do everything alone, she added softly. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away, because now I could hear it clearly. Not just concern, direction. She was guiding the conversation somewhere, and I finally understood where. You've mentioned that before, I said carefully. I just care about you, she replied. I know. Another pause. Then she took a small step further. Maybe we should talk about getting some things in place, she said. You know, just in case. So everything's easier if something ever happens. Easier. There it was again. That word. That plan. That quiet push towards something I now saw clearly. Like what I asked, though, I already knew. Just some paperwork, she said. Nothing major. Just so I can help if you need it. Help. Control. The line between them had never felt thinner. I took a slow breath. I'll think about it, I said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either, and that was exactly what I needed it to be. "Okay," she said, her voice easing slightly. "No pressure. I just want you to be taken care of." Taken care of. I closed my eyes briefly, because for the first time those words didn't feel comforting. They felt dangerous. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. We ended the call a few moments later, calmly, politely, like nothing had happened. But the moment the line went dead, I lowered the phone slowly and stared at the wall in front of me. Every piece of the conversation replayed in my mind. Every word, every pause, every shift in tone. And now, for the first time, I could see it clearly. This wasn't about last night. It wasn't about one drink. It wasn't even about one decision. This was something ongoing, something deliberate, something that had been building step by step, conversation by conversation, until it reached that restaurant. And I had just confirmed something important. Nicole didn't know how much I knew, which meant she would keep going, keep pushing, keep trying to move me toward exactly where she wanted me, and that gave me something I didn't have before: time. Time to understand. Time to prepare. Time to see how far she was willing to go, because now I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was watching. And as I sat there in the quiet of my living room, the truth settling deeper with every passing second, one thought became impossible to ignore. My daughter wasn't trying to hurt me in a moment of anger. She was trying to take control of my life, and she believed she could do it without me ever realizing what was happening. But now, I did. 2 days later, Nicole asked if we could sit down and talk properly. That was how she phrased it: calm, reasonable, almost caring. "I just think we should go over a few things together," she said on the phone. "No pressure. Just planning." Planning. By then I knew exactly what that word meant. But I agreed, because Martin had been clear and Detective Sharon Briggs had reinforced it when I met her briefly the day before. If Nicole believed I was still unaware, she would continue revealing the structure of her plan. And that structure was what we needed. So I said yes. We scheduled it for late afternoon at my house. When I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at nothing in particular, feeling the weight of what I had just agreed to settle into my chest. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a performance. And for the first time in my life, I was about to pretend in front of my own child. Sharon arrived an hour before Nicole. She didn't look like what people imagine when they hear detective. No uniform, no visible authority. Just a woman in her 40s, composed, observant, her presence quiet, but unmistakably controlled. She walked through the house once, noting entrances, exits, sightlines. "Keep everything natural," she told me. "Don't push too hard. Let her lead." I nodded. "What if she doesn't?" I asked. Sharon gave a small, knowing look. "She will." Martin had already arranged for a recording device, small, discreet, placed in the living room where we would be sitting. Legal, documented, careful. Everything about this was careful now, because it had to be. At exactly 4:12 p.m., Nicole knocked. I felt my heartbeat rise as I walked toward the door. For a moment I hesitated with my hand on the handle. Then I opened it. She stood there looking normal. That was the strangest part. No sign of guilt, no visible tension. Just Nicole, well-dressed, composed, holding a folder in one hand and her purse over her shoulder. "Hey, Mom," she said, offering a small smile. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." She walked in like she had done 100 times before, glancing around briefly before settling into the living room. "I brought some things we can go over," she said, placing the folder on the coffee table. Of course she did. I sat across from her, keeping my posture slightly softer than usual, just enough to match the version of me she seemed to expect. Tired. A little slower. Easier to guide. "I'm glad you came," I said. "Me too," she replied quickly. "I've been thinking a lot about you." There it was again. Concern. Layered carefully over intention. We exchanged a few minutes of small talk about the restaurant, the weather, nothing that mattered, but I could feel her watching me, measuring something. Waiting. Finally, she opened the folder. "I know this might feel like a lot," she said gently, "but I just want to make sure everything's in place so you're protected." "Protected?" I nodded slowly as if considering her words. "Okay." She slid the first document toward me. "This is just a basic authorization," she explained. "It would allow me to help manage things if you ever needed it. Nothing changes unless you want it to." I glanced down at the page without really reading it. What kind of things, I asked. "Bill's account's anything that might be overwhelming," she said smoothly. "It just makes everything easier." Easier. Always that word. I looked back up at her. "You think I'm overwhelmed?" Her expression softened instantly. "No," she said quickly. "Not right now, but you've been working so hard for so long. And last night," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "you didn't seem like yourself." There it was. Again. I let my shoulders drop slightly. "I've been tired," I admitted. Her eyes sharpened just for a second. Then she nodded. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "It's normal, Mom. It happens." I stayed quiet. Let her continue. She reached for another document. "This one is more about medical decisions," she said. "Just in case something ever happens and you can't speak for yourself." My stomach tightened. Something like what I asked. Anything she said. An accident. An illness. It's just about being prepared. Prepared. I folded my hands in my lap, playing the part. "And you would make those decisions if you wanted me to," she said quickly. "Only if you wanted me to." But we both knew what she was doing, framing it as my choice, guiding me toward the outcome she had already planned. I leaned back slightly, letting a hint of hesitation show. "It feels like a lot," I said. Her expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. "Mom," she said gently, "I'm just trying to help you. You don't have to do everything alone." I didn't respond right away because something else had just entered the room. Footsteps. Behind her. Brandon. He stepped into the living room as if he belonged there, his presence smooth, controlled. He offered a polite smile. "Mrs. Simmons," he said. "I hope it's okay that I came by." I kept my expression neutral. "Of course," I said. Nicole hadn't mentioned he would be there, but I wasn't surprised. This wasn't just her plan. It was theirs. Brandon took a seat beside her, his posture relaxed, his tone measured. "We just want what's best for you," he said. "Nicole's been worried." Worried. I almost smiled at the word. "She's mentioned that I replied." He nodded, leaning forward slightly. "You've built something incredible," he continued. "But managing all of it alone at this stage, it's a lot for anyone. At this stage." There it was. Age? Capacity. Subtle. Carefully inserted, I looked down at my hands, letting silence stretch just long enough. Then I spoke. "What happens if I sign these?" Nicole answered quickly. "Nothing changes right away," she said. "It just gives us the ability to step in if needed." If needed, I repeated. Brandon nodded. It's about protection, he said. Not control. The word hung there between us, unspoken, but present. I lifted my gaze looking directly at Nicole. And the restaurant, I asked. For the first time she hesitated, just for a second. Then she recovered. Well, eventually it might make sense to transition things, she said carefully. You've done so much with it. Maybe it's time to think about the next phase. The next phase, I repeated. She nodded. You don't have to carry Dad's legacy alone forever, she added. That was the moment, the one that cut through everything else, because it wasn't about concern anymore. It wasn't about paperwork. It was about ownership, control, and what she believed she was entitled to. I let the silence sit, let it stretch. Then I spoke, my voice softer than I felt. I need time to think about this. Nicole's expression tightened slightly. How much time, she asked. Just a few days, I said. Brandon exchanged a quick glance with her. Subtle. But there. Pressure. Of course, he said smoothly. We just don't want to delay things if there's any risk. Risk. Another word. Another layer. I nodded slowly. I understand. We wrapped up shortly after that. Calmly. Politely. Like everything else. Nicole gathered the papers, though she left a few behind intentionally, I realized. A way to keep the conversation open. A way to keep me moving toward her goal. When they stood to leave, she paused by the door. Mom, she said softly, I'm doing this because I love you. I held her gaze, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the glass, the silence, the plan. I know, I said quietly. She smiled. Then she left. The door closed behind them with a soft click. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But not empty, because now it was filled with something else entirely. Truth. I stood there for a long moment, then slowly turned toward the living room, toward the table, toward the papers she had left behind, and toward the realization that settled in my chest like something final. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't concern. It wasn't love, not the kind I had always believed in. This was something deliberate, structured, calculated. And now, I had everything I needed to prove it. After Nicole and Brandon left, I didn't move for a long time. I stood in the entryway staring at the closed door, listening to the fading sound of their footsteps outside until there was nothing left but silence. Then I exhaled. A slow, controlled breath that felt like I had been holding it for days. Sharon stepped out from the hallway a moment later, her expression focused. Well, she said quietly, that was clearer than I expected. I turned toward her, my hands still slightly unsteady. You heard everything. She nodded. Every word. Martin arrived shortly after. He had been waiting nearby, ready to come in once Nicole and Brandon were gone. When he entered, he didn't waste time on small talk. Tell me, he said. Sharon filled him in quickly, summarizing the key points, the language Nicole used, the way Brandon reinforced it, the emphasis on protection, risk, and transition. Martin listened carefully, his expression tightening just enough to show concern, but not surprise. They're moving faster now, he said. Why, I asked. Because they think they're close, Sharon replied before Martin could answer. I felt that settle into my chest. Close. Close to what? To convincing me, or to something else. Martin stepped toward the coffee table and picked up the documents Nicole had left behind. He flipped through them methodically, scanning each page with practiced precision. These are more aggressive than what you described before, he said. How I asked. He looked up at me. They're structured to give broad authority under relatively vague conditions, he explained. Terms like temporary incapacity or difficulty managing affairs, those can be interpreted in ways that are hard to challenge once they're invoked. My stomach tightened. So if I signed these, they could argue that you've already acknowledged the possibility of needing assistance, he said, and then all they would need is a situation real or constructed to activate that authority. Constructed. The word hit me harder than I expected. Like what I asked, though I already knew. Sharon answered this time. Like appearing disoriented, she said. Confused. Forgetful. Any pattern that suggests you're not fully capable of making decisions. A cold wave moved through me. And the drink, I whispered. Sharon nodded once. If it contained a sedative, she said it could have been used to create exactly that kind of impression. The room felt smaller, tighter, because suddenly everything aligned in a way that left no room for doubt. They weren't trying to hurt me, I said slowly. They were trying to weaken you, Martin corrected. Weaken? Control. Take over. The words echoed in my mind, each one heavier than the last. I sank into the chair across from him, my hands resting in my lap. She's my daughter, I said quietly. How does it get to this point? Neither of them answered right away, because there wasn't a simple answer. There's something else, I added after a moment. They both looked at me. The restaurant, I said. She mentioned it today. Not directly, but enough. Martin's expression shifted. What exactly did she say? That maybe it's time to transition things, I replied. That I shouldn't carry Walter's legacy alone forever. That was enough. Martin closed the folder slowly. That's the real target, he said. The words landed like a weight. Not my accounts, not just my house. The restaurant. The one thing Walter and I had built together. The one thing I had fought to keep alive after he died. She knows what it's worth, Sharon added. Financially and emotionally. I nodded slowly. She always did. And suddenly, another memory surfaced. Not recent. Older. From years ago. Nicole had been in her early 20s at the time, sitting at one of the booths in the restaurant late at night after closing. Walter and I were finishing up in the kitchen when she walked over, leaning against the counter. You could sell this place, you know, she had said casually. Walter had looked up from what he was doing, surprised. Why would we do that? He asked. Because it's worth something, she replied. More than you think. You could retire early, travel, do something else. Walter had smiled, then a soft, patient smile. This place is what we chose, he said. It's not just a business. Nicole had shrugged. Everything's a business if it makes money, she said. At the time, it had felt like a generational difference, a young person seeing the world in practical terms. Now, it felt like something else. Something that had been there all along. I looked back at Martin. What do we do now? I asked. He didn't hesitate. We wait, he said. I frowned. For what? For the test results, he replied. And for them to make their next move. They already made a move, I said. Yes, he agreed. But not their final one. Sharon stepped forward slightly. They're testing boundaries right now, she said, seeing how much you'll accept, how quickly you'll agree. And if I don't, I asked. Then they'll escalate, she said. The word settled heavily. Escalate. How I pressed. Martin answered. They may attempt to gather evidence that supports their claim, he said. Conversations, observations, anything that could be used to suggest you're not fully capable. Even if it's not true, especially if it's not true," Sharon said. "Because lies, when repeated carefully, can start to look like patterns, and patterns can become arguments." I sat there in silence, letting that reality sink in. "They're building a case," I said slowly. "Yes," Martin confirmed. "Against me." Another nod, and the drink was just the beginning. No one disagreed. The room fell quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. Heavier. More certain. Because the uncertainty I had been holding on to, the hope that this was all a misunderstanding, was gone. Replaced by something far more solid. Truth. Uncomfortable. Painful. But undeniable. I stood slowly walking over to the window and looking out at the street. Everything looked the same. But I wasn't. "I need to know what Walter left behind," I said suddenly. Martin's voice came from behind me. "You mean the letter?" I turned. "Yes." He studied me for a moment. "He was very specific about when it should be opened," he said, "when I asked. When there was a clear attempt to interfere with your control over the estate or the business." I held his gaze. "And this isn't that." He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "It might be." Might. That word hung between us. A line. One we were dangerously close to crossing. "I think he knew," I said softly. Knew what Sharon asked. "That something like this could happen," I replied. Martin nodded slowly. He was a careful man, he said. He believed in preparing for possibilities most people don't want to consider. I swallowed hard, and he saw something in her I added. Something I didn't. Something I didn't want to see. The weight of that realization pressed against my chest, because if Walter had seen this coming, it meant I had missed it, or ignored it, or refused to believe it. "I want to read it," I said, finally. Martin hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it," he said. And just like that, something shifted again, because whatever Walter had left behind, whatever he had written, it wasn't just going to be about the past. It was going to define what happened next. And as I stood there looking out at a world that no longer felt as simple as it once had, one thought stayed with me. The man who loved our daughter more than anything had prepared for the possibility that one day I might need protection from her. And now, that day had come. I didn't expect the letter to feel so heavy in my hands. It was just paper cream-colored, neatly sealed my name written across the front in Walter's unmistakable handwriting. The same steady script I had seen on grocery lists, receipts, little notes he used to leave for me on the kitchen counter. And yet holding it now, it felt like holding something final. Something he had never intended me to read unless everything else had already gone wrong. Martin sat across from me at his desk, silent. Sharon stood near the window, her posture composed but attentive. Neither of them rushed me. They knew what this moment meant. I traced my fingers lightly over Walter's name on the envelope. For a second, I almost put it down, because opening it meant accepting something I had been trying not to fully admit. That my husband, my partner of 32 years, had seen something in our daughter that I had refused to see, and that he had prepared for it. Slowly, I broke the seal. The sound was soft, almost insignificant, but to me it felt like a door opening. I pulled out the folded pages inside my hands, trembling just slightly as I unfolded them, and then I began to read. Beverly. If you are reading this, it means something has happened that I hoped never would. I wish I were there with you. Not just to help you through whatever this is, but to tell you face to face that none of this is your fault. My vision blurred for a moment and I had to stop. Not yet, I told myself. Keep going. You know how much I love Nicole. There has never been a moment in my life when I didn't believe she could become something extraordinary. She has intelligence, charm, and a strength that most people never develop. But she also has something else, something I have worried about for a long time. I felt my chest tighten, because I already knew what he was going to say, even before I read the words. She struggles with limits, Beverly, with hearing no, with accepting that love does not mean endless rescue. My fingers tightened around the paper. Over the years, I have seen her react not just with disappointment when she doesn't get what she wants, but with resentment. A belief that what she wants should be given because she wants it. That belief can be dangerous if it grows unchecked. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Because he wasn't wrong, and somewhere deep down I had always known it. I have tried in my own way to guide her, to teach her responsibility, patience, respect for what is earned. But I also know that I have protected her more than I should have. And I know you have too. I let out a soft, broken breath, because that was true. We had both done it. Out of love, out of fear, out of not wanting to see her struggle. If she ever finds herself in a place where she feels desperate or entitled to take what is not freely given, I need you to understand something clearly. You are not responsible for fixing that. The words hit harder than anything else so far, because that had always been my instinct. To fix, to repair, to make things right. Even when it cost me. The restaurant was never just a business. It was our life's work. It was built with intention, sacrifice, and years of decisions that were not always easy. It is not meant to be dismantled for convenience, and it is not meant to be used as a solution for problems it did not create. I closed my eyes briefly, letting his words settle. He was protecting it, even now, even from beyond. That is why I have taken steps quietly, carefully to ensure that certain parts of our estate cannot be transferred, sold, or controlled without clear and deliberate consent. No one, not even Nicole, should have the ability to take control of what we built without meeting the conditions we set. My heart pounded slightly faster. Conditions. Safeguards. He had prepared for this. If Nicole ever tries to convince you that you are no longer capable of managing your own life, if she ever attempts to step in without your full and willing consent, I need you to trust your instincts, and I need you to stand firm. My hands trembled now, because that wasn't hypothetical anymore. That was happening. She may believe she is justified. She may convince herself that she is helping. But intent does not erase impact, and love does not excuse harm. Tears blurred the page completely this time, and I had to wipe them away before I could continue. Beverly, you have always been stronger than you think you are. You held our family together when I was here, and you will do it again even if it looks different than before, even if it means letting go of the version of Nicole you wish still existed. The words felt like a quiet breaking inside me, because that was the part I wasn't ready to face. Not fully. Not yet. I don't want you to lose your daughter, but I also don't want you to lose yourself trying to save her. There is a difference, and you deserve to know it. I pressed the letter against my chest, my breathing uneven now. Because he was right, and that truth hurt more than anything else. Whatever happens, remember this. You are not alone. You were never meant to carry everything by yourself. And loving someone does not mean giving them the power to destroy what you've built. Or who you are. I love you. Always. Walter. The room was silent when I lowered the pages. I didn't realize how hard I was shaking until I tried to set the letter down and missed the edge of the desk. Martin reached forward slightly, steadying it. I didn't look at him. I couldn't, Because I wasn't just reading a letter. I was seeing the truth of my life from someone who had understood it better than I had. "How long?" I whispered, my voice barely holding together. How long did he know Martin didn't answer directly? He had concerns, he said carefully. Enough to plan ahead. Sharon remained quiet, but I could feel her watching me, not judging, not analyzing, just present. I took a slow breath, then another, and then I did something I hadn't done since all of this began. I stopped questioning what I felt. I stopped trying to find excuses. I stopped looking for a version of Nicole that would make this easier to accept. Because Walter had already said what I needed to hear. Love does not excuse harm. I lifted my head, my vision still blurred but clearer in a different way. "I won't sign anything," I said. My voice was steady now, more than it had been in days. Martin nodded once. "Good. And I won't let them take control of the restaurant," I added. "Nor should you," he replied. I looked down at the letter one last time, then folded it carefully, not as something to hide away, but as something to carry forward. Because this wasn't just about what Nicole had done, it was about what I was going to do next. And for the first time since that night at the restaurant, I felt something other than fear. Not relief, not peace, but something close. Resolve. Because now I wasn't standing in the middle of confusion anymore. I was standing on the edge of a decision, and whatever came next, I wasn't going to face it as someone who didn't understand what was happening. I was going to face it knowing exactly what was at stake, even if it meant losing the person I had spent my entire life trying to protect. 2 days after I read Walter's letter, everything came to a head. I didn't plan it that way, but sometimes when enough truth builds beneath the surface, it doesn't wait for permission anymore. It forces its way out. Martin had advised me to stay calm, to let things unfold one step at a time. Sharon had agreed watch document don't provoke too early. But Nicole and Brandon didn't wait. They made the next move first. It started with a call from Martin early that morning. "They've filed an inquiry," he said, without preamble. I sat up straighter in my chair, my pulse quickening. An inquiry for what? A preliminary step toward establishing concern about your capacity to manage your affairs, he replied. The words felt clinical, detached, but the meaning behind them was anything but. "They're trying to build a case," I said. "Yes," Martin confirmed, "and they're doing it quickly." A cold calm settled over me. Not panic, not shock, just clarity. "Then we don't wait anymore," I said. There was a pause on the line. "No," Martin agreed quietly. "We don't." By late afternoon, everything was arranged. Nicole and Brandon had agreed to meet under the impression that we were going to resolve things and move forward. That was how Nicole had phrased it in her message. "I think we should all sit down and clear this up, Mom. No more confusion. No more confusion." The irony of that almost made me laugh. The meeting took place in Martin's office. Neutral ground, controlled environment. Exactly what we needed. When I arrived, Sharon was already there, standing near the window, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp. Martin sat behind his desk, calm as always, a folder already open in front of him. I took a seat, folding my hands in my lap, feeling Walter's letter now tucked inside my bag like a quiet anchor. At exactly 3:07 p.m., the door opened. Nicole walked in first. Brandon followed closely behind. They both looked confident. That was the first thing I noticed. Not cautious, not uncertain, confident, as if they believed they were about to take the final step. Mom Nicole said, her tone soft but controlled. "I'm glad you came." "I'm here," I replied simply. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Sharon, then to Martin. "And this is," she asked, "Detective Sharon Briggs," Martin said calmly. "She's here as an observer." The shift in the room was immediate, subtle, but undeniable. Brandon straightened slightly. Nicole's expression tightened just for a fraction of a second. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice still steady but no longer quite as relaxed. Martin didn't answer her question. Instead, he turned to me. "Beverly," he said, "would you like to begin?" I looked at Nicole, really looked at her. And for a moment, I saw both versions of her at once. The little girl from the photograph and the woman sitting across from me now. Then I spoke. "I know what you did at the restaurant," I said. The words landed cleanly. No hesitation, no emotion in my tone. Just truth. Nicole didn't react immediately, but Brandon did. His jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" he said quickly. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on my daughter. "A security guard saw you," I continued. "He saw you put something in my drink." Nicole's gaze held mine for a moment longer. Then she shook her head. "That's not true," she said. Calm. Controlled. Denial. Martin slid a document across the desk. "Toxicology results," he said. Nicole's eyes flicked down to it, then back up. "There must be a mistake," she said. "I didn't—" "It contained a sedative," Sharon said quietly, cutting in for the first time. "A strong one." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Pressing. Nicole's composure didn't break, but something shifted behind her eyes. "You're making a serious accusation," Brandon said, his tone firmer now. "And we have serious evidence," Martin replied. He reached into the folder and placed another item on the desk. A printed statement. "Witness testimony," he said, "from the security guard." Another document followed. Video confirmation of movement consistent with the account. Nicole's breathing changed. Just slightly. But I saw it. And for the first time, she looked uncertain. "This is ridiculous," Brandon said, his voice sharper now. "You can't prove intent." "No," Sharon said evenly. "But we can prove pattern." That got their attention. "Pattern?" Nicole repeated. Martin nodded. "Yes," he said. "Including your inquiries into power of attorney, your attempts to introduce legal documents granting control, your communication history, and your association with financial pressures tied to Mr. Cole." Brandon's face hardened. "Careful," he said. "You don't know what you're implying." "I know exactly what I'm implying," Martin replied. I watched Nicole, watched the cracks begin to form. "This was about control," I said quietly. "Not concern." Her eyes snapped back to mine. "That's not true," she said quickly. "I was trying to help you." "By drugging me?" I asked. Her silence this time was louder than anything she had said before. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said finally. There it was. Not denial. Justification. My chest tightened. "But you knew it was wrong," I said. She hesitated. "Just long enough." "I didn't have a choice," she said. Brandon shifted beside her. "Nicole." "No," she said, cutting him off, her voice rising slightly. "You don't get to act like this wasn't necessary." "Necessary." The word hit harder than anything else. "You thought I was a problem to solve," I said. "I thought you needed help," she snapped. "You thought you were entitled to take over my life. I thought you were going to lose everything if someone didn't step in," she shot back. The room went still, because for a moment that sounded almost honest. But it didn't last. Sharon leaned forward slightly. And the sedative, she asked. Was that part of helping Nicole's expression faltered? That wasn't supposed to, she began, then stopped. Too late. That wasn't supposed to, what I asked softly, her eyes filled with something frustration, fear, something tangled between them. It was just to make things easier, she said. Easier. There it was again. Always that word. Easier for who I asked. She didn't answer, because she couldn't. Brandon stepped in, then his tone sharper. She didn't plan this alone, he said. Nicole turned toward him, her eyes widening. What are you doing? She whispered. You're not taking all the blame for this, he replied. Sharon's gaze shifted between them. Interesting. Very interesting. You suggested it, Nicole said suddenly, her voice breaking through the tension. You said it would work. Brandon's jaw clenched. I said it was an option, he snapped. You agreed to it. The alliance cracked. Right there. In front of us. You said she was vulnerable, Nicole continued, her voice rising. You said it wouldn't hurt her, just make things easier to prove. Prove. The word hung in the air. Prove what? Sharon answered before I could. Prove incapacity, she said quietly. Nicole's face went pale. Because she knew it was true. And she knew we understood it. I sat there listening to them unravel and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not even shock. Just sadness. Because this wasn't just a plan. It was a belief. A belief that they had the right to do this. That's enough, Martin said finally, his voice firm. The room fell silent again, but the damage was done. The truth was out. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to see what this really was. And as I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, I realized something that settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just about what she had done, it was about who she had chosen to become. And that was something I couldn't ignore anymore. For a long moment after the room fell silent, no one moved. Not Martin, not Sharon, not even Brandon. But I couldn't take my eyes off Nicole, because what had just happened wasn't just exposure, it was collapse. The version of her she had carefully constructed, the calm daughter, the concerned voice, the one trying to help, had cracked wide open, and there was no putting it back together. You said it wouldn't hurt her, Nicole repeated, her voice lower now, but no less sharp, turning toward Brandon. You said it would just make her seem off, that we needed something to show a pattern. Brandon's expression hardened, his composure slipping just enough to reveal the man underneath. And you agreed, he said flatly. Don't pretend you didn't know what we were doing. I didn't think it would go this far, she shot back. You didn't think at all, he replied. The words landed between them like a knife. And suddenly, they weren't a team anymore. They were two people trying to survive the same mistake. I felt something inside me shift as I watched them. Not anger, not even betrayal, not in the way I had expected. Just a quiet, devastating clarity. Nicole, I said softly. She turned to me. And for the first time since all of this began, I saw something real in her eyes. Not control, not calculation. Fear. Look at me, I said. She did, but it wasn't easy for her. Her gaze flickered like she wanted to hold on to something, some version of herself that no longer fit. You didn't do this because you had no choice, I continued. Her lips parted slightly. I was trying to... No, I said gently but firmly. Don't do that. Not anymore. The room felt smaller, closer. Because this wasn't about evidence now. This was about truth, the kind you can't dress up or soften. I know you're scared, I said. I know things didn't go the way you expected. Her breathing quickened. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I believe that, I replied. And I did. That was the hardest part. I didn't think it was like that, she added, her voice breaking slightly. I thought if I could get control of things, I could fix everything. The debt, the pressure, everything. There it is, I said quietly. Her eyes filled. I was drowning, she whispered, and you wouldn't help me anymore. The words hit me, but not the way they used to, because now I could see the difference. This wasn't a cry for help. It was justification. I didn't stop helping you, I said. I stopped fixing things you didn't want to face. That's not fair, she said, shaking her head. You had everything. You still do. The house, the restaurant, the money, and you believed that made it yours, I interrupted. She froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. No, she said quickly. You believed you were entitled to it. I continued, my voice still calm. Because I'm your mother. That's not what this is, she snapped. Then what is it, I asked? Silence. Because there wasn't another answer. Brandon let out a quiet, bitter laugh. She's been telling herself that story for years, he said. That you owe her something. That all of this, he gestured vaguely, was supposed to be hers eventually anyway. Stop, Nicole said sharply. But he didn't. And you know what, he continued. Maybe she's right. Maybe it was just a matter of speeding things up. Enough, Martin said firmly, but the damage was already done. Because those words, they weren't new. They were just spoken out loud for the first time. I looked at Nicole again, and this time I didn't see the little girl in the photograph. I saw the woman who had made a choice, a conscious one. You didn't do this because you were desperate, I said. Her face crumpled slightly. You did it because you believed you had the right. That's not true, she whispered. It is, I said. Tears slid down her cheeks now, but they didn't change what had already happened. I was scared, she said again. I know, I replied. I didn't know what else to do. Yes, you did, I said softly. She shook her head. No, I didn't. You could have asked for help. I said, I did. You could have taken responsibility. I continued. I tried. You could have accepted that I wouldn't fix everything for you. That was the one that stopped her. Because it was the truth she had been avoiding the longest. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely holding together. I was losing everything. And you thought taking everything from me would solve that I asked. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Sharon spoke then, her tone steady, grounding the moment back in reality. The plan was to create a pattern of instability, she said. That's what the sedative was for. Nicole closed her eyes briefly. I didn't think it would go that far, she repeated. But you knew what it was for, Sharon said. A long pause. Then quietly, yes. The words settled into the room like something final. Because that was it. The line. Crossed. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger, but with something far more difficult. Grief. Not for what had happened, but for what was lost. Because there are moments in life when you realize that something you thought was unbreakable isn't. And there's no fixing it the way it used to be. I can't protect you from this, I said finally. Nicole's eyes snapped open. What? I can't make this go away, I continued. Not this time. Her face went pale. Mom, I've spent years trying to fix things for you, I said. Trying to make things easier. Trying to take the pain away before you had to face it. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't soften either. And this is where it led us. Tears streamed down her face now. You're just going to let them. I'm going to let the truth stand, I said. She stared at me, like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Because I wasn't the same person I had been before. Not after all of this. You're choosing them over me, she whispered. The words used to break me. Now, they didn't. I'm choosing myself, I said quietly. The room went still, because that was the part she had never expected. Not from me. Not ever. I love you, I added, her breath hitched. But I won't let you destroy what I built. Or who I am. Silence. Heavy. Final. And in that silence I felt something shift again. Not relief, not peace, but something close to strength. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to hold everything together. I was letting the truth do that for me. And whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story, but it was the end of pretending. In the weeks that followed, everything slowed down, and at the same time, everything became painfully clear. Legal processes don't move quickly, but they move deliberately. And once something like this begins, it doesn't simply disappear because someone regrets it. Statements were taken. Evidence was organized. Timelines were reconstructed. And piece by piece, what had once felt like confusion turned into something structured, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Brandon faced the worst of it. That didn't surprise me. From what Sharon and Martin explained, his involvement went beyond suggestion. There were records, financial ones, that painted a much clearer picture than anything he had said in that room. Debt. Significant debt. Unpaid obligations. Risky transactions tied to ventures that had already collapsed. And more importantly, communications. Messages where he laid out strategies. Ways to position me as unstable. Ways to simplify the transition. Ways to gain access without triggering immediate resistance. The language was calculated, detached, cold. When I first heard it, I felt something twist in my chest, not just because of what he had planned, but because of how easily he had spoken about it. Like it was just another problem to solve. Nicole's role was different, not innocent, not blameless, but different. She hadn't written those messages. She hadn't designed the structure, but she had agreed to it, participated in it, carried it forward, and that distinction, while important legally, didn't make it easier emotionally, because knowing someone followed a plan doesn't change the fact that they chose to follow it. There were conversations I didn't attend. Meetings between attorneys, investigators, and officials where decisions were made based on evidence, not emotion. Martin kept me informed, but carefully, never overwhelming me with details I didn't need, never hiding the truth either. Brandon's situation worsened quickly. Charges related to fraud, conspiracy, attempted coercion tied to financial gain. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that this hadn't started with me. I had been the target, but not the origin. Nicole, on the other hand, stood in a more complicated space. She cooperated partially, enough to distance herself from some of Brandon's actions, enough to show she hadn't initiated everything, but not enough to erase her involvement, and not enough to undo what she had done. I didn't go to every hearing. I couldn't. Some things are easier to face when they're not happening directly in front of you. But I did go to one, the one where she spoke. Not as my daughter, but as someone answering for her choices. She looked different, not physically, but in a way that was harder to describe. Less certain, less controlled, as if the version of herself she had been holding on to had finally slipped away. She didn't look at me at first, and when she finally did, it wasn't with anger or accusation. It was with something quieter, something heavier. I didn't know if it was regret or just the realization that things had gone further than she had intended. Maybe both. After that, I made a decision. Not about the case. That was already moving forward on its own. But about my life. Because for too long, everything had revolved around holding things together, keeping the peace, avoiding the kind of break that felt permanent. But now, the break had already happened, and pretending it hadn't wasn't going to fix anything. I met with Martin again. I want to restructure everything I told him. He nodded as if he had expected it. The estate, the restaurant, all of it. "We can do that," he said. "What do you have in mind?" I took a breath. "The restaurant goes into a trust," I said. "Protected. No one touches it without strict conditions." "Understood. And my personal assets," I continued. "I want clear boundaries, no ambiguity, no room for interpretation." Martin made a few notes. "That will prevent anything like this from happening again," he said. "That's the point," I replied. There was a pause. Then he looked at me more carefully. "And Nicole?" he asked. That was the part I hadn't said out loud yet. Not fully. "I'm not cutting her out completely," I said slowly. "But access changes." "In what way?" "She doesn't get control," I said. "Not now. Not later. Not unless something fundamentally changes, and even then, it won't be automatic." Martin nodded. "That's reasonable." Reasonable? The word felt strange, because nothing about this had ever felt reasonable. But maybe that was the difference now. I wasn't making decisions based on emotion anymore. I was making them based on reality. The restaurant changed too, not in ownership, but in meaning. For years it had been something I held on to because it was tied to Walter, to what we had built, to what we had lost. But after everything that happened, it became something else, something more. I started spending more time there again, not out of obligation, but by choice, talking to customers, sitting with regulars, listening to stories that had nothing to do with mine. And slowly, I began to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I started opening the space up, not just as a business, but as something warmer, more human. On Wednesday evenings, we began hosting small dinners. Nothing formal, just a few tables set aside for women who needed a place to sit, to talk, to not feel alone. Widows, divorced women, women who had spent years taking care of everyone else and didn't know what to do when they finally had to take care of themselves. At first, it was quiet. A few conversations, a few shared moments, but it grew. Because people recognize spaces where they're allowed to be honest. And that's what it became. A place where you didn't have to pretend everything was fine. A place where you could say things out loud that you had been carrying for years. And in those moments, I found something I didn't expect. Not closure, not exactly, but something close to it. Perspective. Because I wasn't the only one who had faced something like this. Different stories, different details, but the same underlying truth. Love without boundaries doesn't protect relationships, it destroys them. And slowly, I began to understand that. not just as an idea, but as something real, something lived, something I had finally accepted. I didn't speak to Nicole during that time, not directly, not because I didn't think about her, but because I needed space to understand what this meant. Not just for her, but for me. Because forgiveness, if it ever comes, has to be real, not something forced, not something done out of guilt. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to give something I didn't fully mean. Not anymore. Time didn't heal everything, but it gave things space. And sometimes, space is what healing needs most. 3 months passed, then 4, then 6. The world didn't pause for what had happened, and neither did I. Not in the way I used to. I still woke up early. I still opened the restaurant most mornings. I still checked inventory, spoke with Denise about staffing, greeted customers who had become more like family over the years. But something inside me had shifted. Before I had worked because I felt I had to. Now, I worked because I chose to. That difference mattered more than I expected. The restaurant felt different too. Not in appearance, the same booths, the same lighting, the same quiet hum of conversation, but in purpose. It wasn't just something I was holding on to anymore. It was something I was building again. On Wednesday nights, the small gatherings we had started turned into something steady, not large, not loud, but consistent. Women came in quietly at first, unsure, hesitant, carrying stories they weren't sure anyone would understand. And then they stayed. They talked. They laughed sometimes through tears. They listened to each other in a way that doesn't happen often anymore. No judgment, no expectation, just presence. I didn't lead those conversations. I didn't need to. I just made sure the space existed. And somehow that was enough. In those evenings, I began to see something I hadn't fully understood before. Strength doesn't always look like holding everything together. Sometimes it looks like letting things fall apart and choosing what to rebuild. That realization didn't come all at once. It came slowly, in moments, in small shifts, like the day I walked into the house and didn't feel the need to check every lock twice. Or the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about that night at the restaurant for hours. Or the first time I laughed, really laughed, without something inside me tightening afterward. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. Quietly. And then one afternoon, it was interrupted. I found the letter in the mailbox. It wasn't unusual at first glance. Just another envelope among bills and advertisements, but the handwriting, I recognized it immediately. Nicole. My fingers paused for just a moment before I picked it up. Not fear, not exactly, just awareness. Because whatever was inside that envelope, it wasn't going to be simple. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. I didn't open it right away. I made a cup of coffee, sat down, looked at it, waited. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel like I had to respond immediately. I had learned something over these past months. Distance creates clarity, and clarity changes everything. Finally, I opened it. The paper inside was folded neatly, the words written carefully, slower than I remembered, more deliberate. I began to read. Mom, I don't know how to start this without sounding like I'm trying to make excuses, so I'm not going to. I was wrong. I stopped. Not because I needed to, but because those 3 words carried more weight than anything else she could have written. I kept reading. What I did, what I agreed to. I've gone over it in my head more times than I can count. I've tried to understand how I got there, how I convinced myself it was okay. And the truth is, I knew it wasn't. My chest tightened slightly, because that was the part I had already understood. I told myself I was out of options, that I was backed into a corner, that if I didn't do something, everything would fall apart. But that wasn't true. I just didn't want to face what I had created. I let out a slow breath, because that was honesty. Not perfect, not complete, but real. I was angry at you for a long time, for things I didn't say out loud, for things I convinced myself were your fault, and I let that anger turn into something else, something that made me believe I was owed something. I closed my eyes briefly. Walter had seen it. I had seen it. And now, she was seeing it too. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve that. But I needed to say this without trying to explain it away. The words blurred slightly as I read them. You didn't fail me. I failed myself. I lowered the letter for a moment, letting that settle, because that was something she had never said before. Not once. If there's ever a chance to fix even a small part of what I broke, I'll take it. But I understand if there isn't. The letter ended simply. No dramatic closing, no plea, just her name, Nicole. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading. The house was quiet. The coffee had gone cold. And for the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel pulled in two directions. I didn't feel like I had to choose between anger and forgiveness, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. And it doesn't begin with the other person. It begins with you, with what you're ready for, with what you're not. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't write back. Not yet. Because this time, I wasn't going to rush. I wasn't going to fill the silence out of habit or guilt. I was going to let it be what it needed to be. Space. For her. For me. For whatever might come next. That evening I went to the restaurant. The Wednesday dinner was already starting when I arrived. Familiar faces, soft conversations, the quiet comfort of people who understood more than they needed to say. I moved through the room slowly, greeting people, checking in, making sure everything felt right. And at one point, I paused, just for a second, looking around, taking it in, because this was what I had rebuilt. Not just a business, not just a routine, but a life. One that didn't depend on someone else's approval. One that didn't collapse when something broke. One that could hold both loss and hope at the same time. And as I stood there in that space filled with quiet strength and shared stories, I realized something. I hadn't lost everything, not even close. I had lost an illusion, and in its place, I had found something real, something steady, something that couldn't be taken away. And maybe someday, if Nicole truly understood what she had written, if she continued down that path of truth instead of avoidance, there might be something left to rebuild between us. But this time, it wouldn't come at the cost of who I am, because I had finally learned the difference between loving someone and losing yourself trying to save them. And I wasn't going to forget it again. There's something we don't talk about enough, especially as women who have spent most of our lives caring for others. We are taught that love means sacrifice, that being a good mother means always giving more time, more patience, more forgiveness, even when it hurts, even when it breaks something inside us. But here's the truth I learned the hardest way possible. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And surrender over time doesn't protect relationships, it destroys them. Because when someone believes they are entitled to you, your time, your energy, your life, they stop seeing you as a person. They start seeing you as a solution. And that's where things become dangerous, especially for women in our stage of life. We are often told to keep the peace, to understand, to let things go. But peace built on silence isn't real peace, and understanding without accountability isn't healing, it's avoidance. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. And honesty, real honesty, is the only place where true healing can begin, whether it's with your children, your family, or even yourself. If you've ever been in a situation where love and pain felt tangled together, I want you to know you're not alone. And more importantly, you're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to say no without explaining it 10 different ways. Because your life, your dignity, your sense of self, they matter too. If this story spoke to you in any way, I would truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set a boundary that changed a relationship? Do you believe forgiveness should always come with reconciliation? Tell me in the comments. And if you're comfortable, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always find it amazing how stories connect us across different places and moments. And if stories like this resonate with you, you're always welcome here. Consider subscribing so we can keep sharing these moments together. You're not alone, not in this.